And I think I just screwed that up. My apologies. So I want to welcome everybody to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. The Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am your only host today for the Retro Rogues Live. So I guess it's the Retro Rogue Live today. This is pretty much just going to be like more or less of a placeholder episode. I don't know if anybody's even going to be checking this out because, unfortunately, my co-host, Dave Beatty, he is indisposed at the moment. He is actually working on his apologize for that. He's actually working on his company, Kirby Tees. So I will give a little shout out to Dave's company, Kirby Tees. Please check out kirbytees.com. That is actually the reason that I am flying solo today, is because Dave is actually in the middle of a project for Kirby Tees, and Dave and I have always agreed that when it comes to our businesses, when it comes to basically anything that might make us a little bit of money, we know that that's going to have to take priority over the show. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often because Dave is extremely busy, and Dave has a number of projects besides Kirby Tees that he's involved with. So I'm actually surprised it doesn't happen more often than it does. But for the sake of the algorithm, I know I have to do something. So this will be kind of more of an abbreviated episode, more of I guess, kind of a free-for-all, if you will. I do have a couple things that I did prepare so that if I was just talking to myself, I at least had something to say. But I'm glad to see I'm not exactly talking to myself. It looks like James is in the house. James, thank you for your comment. And he says, Eric is the new Han Solo, ? Drinking from a solo cup. Yes, I actually am today. I am drinking from my solo water bottle here, actually. Old Gatorade bottle that I use to have my water. But yes, I am flying solo today because, again, Dave is working on a project for his company right now for Kirby Tees. He's under the gun a little bit, and hopefully he gets that all done well. And we wish him the best, and I'm sure he'll be back on Sunday, which, of course, for those of you that may not know, Thursdays. Gosh, I don't even know what day it is. So on the shows that we do typically, on a Thursday, are a collector's corner. We do a collector's corner focus show. There's the graphic there for the collector's corner. So normally we will talk about things like comic books. We will talk about things like trading cards, action figures. We'll really talk about anything. One of these days we'll talk about some video games or something like that. But primarily we talk about action figures, trading cards, and comics. Unfortunately, because Dave isn't here, we don't have that main topic for you today. I'm sure that Dave had some trading cards that he had picked out, possibly some comics that he had picked out for this episode, but we don't have them. What we do have is a little bit of pop culture news that is related to the Collector's Corner. So I am going to go ahead and talk about some of this stuff so that we do have something at least to talk about on today's episode. And Jane, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you heard me mention that Dave isn't on the show today because he is working very hard at the moment doing a project for Kirby Tees. So it's just going to be me. This is probably going to wind up being sort of like a mini-sode, a small episode, since it is just me running solo, and I'm not used to that format, so I will just wing it the best that I can. But I do have a couple stories for you that are related to collecting, so I'm going to start out with them before we get to the Richard Donner tribute, which I do want to talk quite a bit about Richard Donner and my feelings about his recent passing. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about a little bit of pop culture news. So I'm probably one of the few people you'll ever see that is willing to promote someone who is directly competing with me at this very moment, as a matter of fact. So at this very moment, there is a virtual convention going on. And this, as I understand it, this has been primarily organized by Retro Blasting, but involves a number of other collaborators. And this event started on Wednesday, July 7th, so it is in full swing. It's called Iconicon. And it's a virtual convention of sorts, basically with various YouTubers. As you can see, they started out on Wednesday with a watch-along where they were watching Hercules. And did a watch along on that was on Wednesday. As you can see on Thursday, they've been having quite a bit of content just today. They started out like at 8 a.m. What and why we collect. There we go. That was one of their first panels. They had another panel on the real Ghostbusters toys. Another one on the Argos toy catalogs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We've got a debate involving Highlander, Star Trek IV, and the Breakfast Club. 80s metal decade review. They had an interview with a conversation with Bruce Broughton and the founders of La La Land Records. And if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize. British TV of the 80s around the world. And another one called Tomahawk Helicopter Review, and competing with me right now, the great G.I. Joe comics debate. Interestingly enough, I actually did collect G.I. Joe comics. I actually would have something to say in a discussion like that. But they do have a full length of programming tomorrow. You can see they're going to be doing a Masters of the Universe panel. They're going to be doing something with Stephen King. They're going to be interviewing the Boglins creator, Tim Clark. I kind of remember that toy, the Boglins. I actually do remember that. Toys that disgusted us. That sounds interesting. Sword and Sorcery of the 80s. Comparing the Cuts legend, Night of the Comet, strong female characters of the 80s. Interestingly enough, I think that actually features one of the actresses that is involved with Staycation. That's the film that the executive producer on. Because I believe she's actually involved. I'll have to confirm that, but I believe one of these actresses that they're talking about is actually involved with Staycation. We've got How to Make a Custom Anti-Eternia He-Man, The Last Impact of the Big Three, Master of the Universe, Transformers, and G.I. Joe. They've got a toy auction going tomorrow. They've got a thing about Axel Foley, Beverly Hills Cop. And then they have a thing about Canon films, which sounds interesting, as well as Bionic 6 Part 1. Wow, Bionic 6. It's been a long time since I've heard anybody discuss Bionic 6. In fact, actually, Dave and I were discussing Bionic 6 just not too long ago, out of nowhere. Child Safety in the 80s and now. So that's just tomorrow. And then Saturday, they have another full slate of programming. It goes all the way through Sunday. As you can see, there's quite a lot going on. They are even broadcasting as I speak. So I would encourage you to check it out. Not necessarily right now, but definitely check it out later because they've got a ton of programming, and you can always check out the repeat, right? If you don't get to see the live discussions going on right now. I did put a link out there if anybody's interested. That is a link to the entire schedule for the Iconicon. Retro Blasting does a lot of great video content when it comes to collectibles. I know Analog Toys is also involved with the programming of this. In fact, I believe he did the introduction video, which I did watch the other day. And Analog Toys, I think, does a lot of great collector's content as well. So obviously, if you're into action figures, and it looks also to some extent, if you're just into anything 80s, right? Because it looks like they're talking about music and movies in addition to just action figures and stuff like that, which is the focus of most of their channels. Check it out. I think it'll be interesting. The the convention is kind of an interesting phenomenon, right? This is something that I think has been attempted in the past. It's something that has become a lot more popular because of the pandemic. But obviously people are still trying to do these things, and this one is free, and that's pretty nice. So it might be something fun to check out, especially, now I feel like, the physical conventions are starting to finally come back a little bit. I know Dave actually has a convention. I don't think he's made an announcement yet, but I know he's going to be making an appearance at a convention. I'm actually planning to attend Star Trek Vegas in August, which is no longer Star Trek Vegas, right? Now it's a celebration of something or something like that, because apparently they lost the license, which is kind of interesting since they had the Star Trek license for so long. Creation Entertainment had the Star Trek license so long, but this is the first year in however long, I can't remember, because Creation's been doing Star Trek conventions forever, that they lost the license. But they're doing an event in August that basically is still Star Trek Vegas. I mean, they have, if you look at the lineup, they're going to have a lot of the major stars. Kelsey Grammer, of all people, is going to the Star Trek Vegas convention this year. But it's not officially called Star Trek Vegas anymore. Spoilers, James. What spoiler did I put out there? Did I put out a spoiler? Wow, I didn't even realize that. What did I spoil? But yeah, there are physical conventions coming back. So it is interesting to see a virtual convention like this. I actually heard Midnight's Edge. They were doing a show. I think they might even still be doing their show. And they were talking about the fact that DC and Marvel are possibly not going to support San Diego ComicCon this year. And of course, the thing is with San Diego ComicCon is they're supposed to be doing an event in November. And the thing is, at this point, nobody really knows if that event is going to be physical or if it's going to be virtual. In fact, they kept discussing that, and I kept trying to mention to them in the comments, well, it's still up in the air. They still haven't decided officially on whether that's going to be a virtual event or if that's going to be an actual physical event. And, to show that I have good sources on this, because unlike some other people who will often claim that they have inside knowledge of things and really do not, I actually do have something I can show you here. So this is from the official San Diego Comic-Con website right here. And this is right on their front page. It says Comic-Con front page, and it says statement regarding Comic-Con special edition. It says, due to recent inquiries, we'd like to clarify that the traditional Comic-Con in-person event in San Diego, normally held in July, has been postponed until summer 2022. However, Comic-Con at Home will return in its online event July 23rd, 25th, 2021. This fall, we're planning a smaller supplemental event we're calling Comic-Con Special Edition, taking place on November 26th through 28th, 2021. It's our hope that by that point, conditions will permit in-person public gatherings of this kind. As details are still being finalized, badge cost, attendance, capacity, and related information will be forthcoming. And this has not been updated since April 13th of 2021. So for anybody wondering about that and the return of conventions and such, I actually had thought that this was going to be an in-person event. And it wasn't until I saw Midnight's Edge discussing this, and they were going back and forth about whether this was going to be an in-person event or online. We don't know. This is the official statement, and it is, basically a pretty dated statement. So it sounds like they're still on the line about whether this special, this Comic-Con special edition is actually going to be physical or not. But I think that's interesting, because I know there's a lot of events right now that are struggling with that question about whether they're going to do a physical event. But as I mentioned, the people at Creation, the old Star Trek Vegas people, they are going to be doing an event. I know that for sure, because at this point, I don't think they would allow people to still be buying tickets and making plans if they were to cancel it. So, and it's been in the works for a while, and Vegas is fairly open at this point. And James says Eric will be at a closed mall near you soon. Yeah, it is funny what's happening to malls. Yeah, I hear you on that. It says, and then James went on to say, Dave, and a convention and not staying at Kirby T's during it, leaving the house and being able to meet and greet the actual public. Yeah, that's the name of the game when it comes to conventions, right? That's, I think, what we all really love about conventions is the ability to interact with people. one of the things that I really enjoy sometimes is I will wait to buy a product because I actually want to buy the product from the people that are making it. If it's a comic book, I like to meet the writer or the artist or both and get them to sign it and maybe talk to them a little bit about their book or, that kind of a thing. Conventions are the one place that allow you to do that. And so that I think that is one of the reasons that sometimes people feel like these online events can fall flat a little bit. But I do think that event that Iconicon that they're doing right now is worth checking out. I will say that. All right, now I do have another piece of news here. So let me grab that for you. Now, this is a follow-up on something I have been talking about. This is an Indiegogo campaign, and I wanted to give an update about it because I had spoken about this before when this campaign launched. So this is for Cyberfrog, and whether you're familiar with it or not, this is something that Ethan Van Shiver has been doing. A lot of people call him EVS. His brand is called All Caps Comics, and this is the first wave of Cyberfrog action figures. It's the first wave of fully articulated Cyberfrog 1/12 scale toys based on the smash hit crowdfunded comic. So I wanted to show you that, and my understanding is this just went live on Sunday. I could be wrong. It could be off a couple days, but this campaign has not been live very long. As you can see, it still has 26 days left to go. And as of right now, it's got over 1,000 backers and it's over $220,000. Now, their goal is $400,000. So they are over the halfway mark. That is a pretty ambitious goal. But we are talking about basically actual physical toys here. If you can see some of these images here, I mean, these are pretty impressive toys. My understanding is they're the same, like the same size as, the sort of like the Marvel Legends line, the 6-inch line. That's what I believe is the scale for these. So they would actually fit alongside those, if you had a collection of those Marvel Legends figures, these figures I think would fit alongside them quite well. I'm not that familiar with Cyberfrog. I don't own any copies of it or anything like that. But I do like to promote independent content, and I do think it's really neat that he's doing this. It's an ambitious goal, $400,000, right? That is definitely an ambitious goal. But we are talking about fully articulated toys here. And you can see the different characters here, the frog characters, the Heather character, this sort of crazy bee character, which I think actually Dave knew how to pronounce this, and I don't. But check it out. It's interesting. I'm going to go ahead and put the link out there just so people are aware of it if they want to check it out. I've used Indiegogo for various projects. We used Indiegogo for Staycation. That's how we got our funding to basically continue filming. We've still been filming Staycation, so that's still going strong. They've been filming over there in California. So, I like to support other people's campaigns, and this is something that's actually related to collectibles. So give it a shot. And if any of you are familiar with Cyberfrog, good, bad, whatever your experience, I'd be curious on your thoughts because I've never actually read any of the Cyberfrog books. But these toys do look interesting to me, and the images do look interesting to me. So it might be something that's worthy of your time. All right. So I think that's all I've got really for actual pop culture news, especially anything related to collectibles. I did want to talk about collectibles at least a little bit, since that is typically the focus of the Thursday show. For those of you that might not be familiar with our program format or anything like that, normally we will do like every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. We usually do a Collector's Corner focus show. Unfortunately, my partner is not here. Dave normally talks about things like comic books, trading cards. I normally actually talk about action figures more than anything else when it comes to Collector's Corner. So that's typically what we do on our Thursday show, but Dave's not here because he is working on a project for his company, Kirby Tees. And so I'm just flying solo today. I'm kind of winging it. And if anybody has other topics of discussion that you want to bring up, please feel free. This is a little bit of a free for all. I don't have a really set format since I don't have Dave with me today. But I do have another article for you. So, well, not an art. Well, yeah, an article. And this is related to, I guess, my main topic for tonight. And I did want to make sure that I talked about it before it kind of, unfortunately, as the world is, before this is kind of like completely out of the news cycle. I did see that there's some new articles that have been coming out related to this topic. So I think it's still topical and it's still something I definitely want to talk about. So this is a Hollywood Reporter article. If you haven't heard, I'm very sorry to give you the bad news, but the title of the article reads, Richard Donner, Superman and Lethal Weapon director, dies at 91. His big screen work, or his big screen body of work, also includes Inside Movies, starring John Savage as a suicide survivor, the broad Richard Pryor, Jackie Gleason comedy, The Toy, and of course, The Goonies, which I think a lot of people are familiar with that film. So I definitely want to talk about Richard Donner because we actually have done a review fairly recently of basically relating to the Snyder Cut. We did a review of the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. So I'm actually going to put that link in there. This is from the YouTube there if you want to check it out. We did a full review on this film here. Let me put myself on screen there. Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Big tribute for me that I own this. I mentioned this quite a bit, that I do not own a lot of physical media. I just don't. I just don't have the space for it. In fact, I've got way too much junk in my house, way too much stuff in boxes, stuff I don't get to display and don't really have access to. So I don't have a ton of physical media, even though I like physical media. I'm a physical media guy, but I don't have that many physical media things. I don't have that many movies in my collection or TV shows for that matter. But this is one I do have. Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. And I was just sharing the review that we did of that film. Something that I think is really a huge trendsetter. We tried to make that argument when we talked about it. That basically, this was the Snyder Cut before the Snyder Cut existed. That's the way I'm going to put it. Of course, what I think people will always kind of remember Richard Donner for is this film, of course. This is the original Superman, the movie. Okay. This is a classic film. This is something I recommend for everybody. I don't care whether you even like superheroes or not. I don't care if you even like Superman or not. I think that it's hard not to enjoy this film. I know at this point there's always somebody. I mean, I was looking on Twitter, and of course there's always somebody that has to say, oh, it's overrated. And of course they have to say that right after the passing of Richard Donner, just to be that extra bit of an asshole, right? This is a great film. Okay, it's a classic film. This particular copy that I have is actually from the collection. There was a Superman, I think, Legacy collection. I don't have the big box, but it had all the movies in it. Superman 2, 3, Superman 4. It was a little box set that had all of them in it. And it's one of the things that I hold very, very, very precious. And I would like to point out that a lot of people, they don't really like the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 because they like the theatrical version so much, and I totally understand that. I don't want to give you the spoiler for my review, but I will say I understand that position. But what's interesting is you have to remember that so much of Superman 2, the theatrical version, was in fact shot by Richard Donner. All the Gene Hackman scenes, for instance, were shot by Richard Donner because Gene Hackman refused to come back after Richard Donner was fired from Superman 2. So, in fact, about 75%, of the film of Superman 2 was finished by the time they finished Superman. They were shooting back to back, but they didn't quite finish Superman 2. Then, of course, they fired Richard Donner. They brought in a different director, and we get the Superman 2, theatrical version, which is different. And they did shoot a lot of additional scenes, and it is a very different movie from the Richard Donner cut. It is a different movie. The theatrical cut is a different movie, but a lot of that film was shot by Richard Donner. So even Superman 2, the theatrical cut, I think, is an important part of Richard Donner's legacy that I think people need to consider. Now, one of the things I also wanted to point out from this article that I thought was really interesting is I didn't realize, for instance, that Richard Donner was actually in the Navy. So I wanted to give him that shout out that he was a veteran. I didn't know that. I myself was in the Navy Reserve. So I definitely want to point that out, that he was a veteran. He did serve in the United States Navy. Apparently he was an aerial photographer, which is very interesting. I did not know that. Another thing is a lot of you may realize this. I didn't. He actually helmed, he was a director on 6 episodes of The Twilight Zone. And he actually did the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet episode, which of course stars William Shatner. If you're a William Shatner fan and a Twilight Zone fan, I'm sure you're familiar with that episode. It's a classic. And Richard Donner actually was the one who directed that. I thought that was really interesting. And I didn't realize how much Richard Donner really cut his teeth on TV. He really started out as a TV director. And I find that really fascinating because I've had discussions with directors who are really into film, right? And really into independent film. And I'll ask them sometimes, why don't you do some television? Do some television to pay the bills or whatever, get your name out there. And a lot of them, they just don't want to do it. And I think it's very strange because I think that there's a lot of directors out there that cut their teeth in television, got their name established in television. They network. I mean, it's who is really important in Hollywood. And they understood that. They understood that it was a stepping stone, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they just wanted some work, right? I can't speak for the man, especially now that he's passed. But I'm just saying, I know that he's not alone in that respect. This man did a lot of television before he became what I think everybody knows him as, which is a film director and also producer. He's also very well known as a producer. And James, respect to you as well for being a Navy vet 10 years. I was in the reserves for about 6 years. I'm curious if you knew if Richard Donner was in the Navy. I think that's a really interesting thing that I did not know about him. And he also mentions much respect to Gene Hackman for taking that stand. And I have a lot of respect for that, too. There was a story that just came out. I think it was on the Hollywood Reporter Variety, where they got a quote from Gene Hackman, who is notoriously private these days. He's retired, and my understanding is he basically keeps to himself for the most part. But I saw that he did reach out to one of these bigger, established Hollywood magazines. And he was talking about the fact that when he showed up on set for Superman, he had a mustache. And basically, Richard Donner was like, hey, that's not going to work. And of course, I guess at the time, mustaches were very popular, and he didn't want to give up his mustache. But Richard Donner had a mustache too. So what Richard Donner did to get Gene Hackman to shave off his mustache was they agreed to shave off their mustaches together. And that's how he was able to get Gene Hackman to remove his mustache so he could play Lex Luthor. I do think that's kind of interesting because I think it would be really weird. I think it would be really, really weird to actually see Lex Luthor with a mustache, So props to Richard Donner for doing that and for shaving off his own mustache so that he could get that done. And yeah, it is fascinating, James. Yeah, I didn't know that Richard Donner was a Navy vet. I thought that was a really interesting thing. Donnie Pearson's in the house, and he says, Base God 14, salute, hello, Eric and all. Hope everyone is well despite the passing of Richard Donner. I have enjoyed his works, even Superman, the movie. So there you go. And, it is interesting to note, as this article points out, that the man had a much larger body of work. As I mentioned, he did a lot of television. And then with his wife, Lauren Schuler Donner, okay, I hope I'm not messing up her name, they produced a lot. In fact, it says here that they met because Schuler, being the producer of Lady Hawk, had hired Richard Donner to direct. and that's how they became a team. Basically, was because Schuler as a producer had hired Richard Donner to direct her film that she was producing, and that's how they met. And of course they became a team when it came to producing after that. Most famously, they produced a lot of the Fox X-Men movies together, which is a really interesting thing, and also a really cool thing for Richard Donner's legacy, being that he was, of course, involved with Superman and all that. So I think that's also really cool. Is a lot of people don't realize what a big producer he was, in addition to being a director. And then, it's just really interesting. There's another movie that I wanted to point out that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I always thought was kind of interesting, which is Conspiracy Theory. I don't know how many people have actually seen that. Okay, Conspiracy Theory, I don't think is a highly regarded film by any means. But Conspiracy Theory is a film that I really thought was interesting, and I also thought it was a really interesting vehicle for Patrick Stewart at the time, who I think clearly was trying to branch out, and he plays a villain in Conspiracy Theory. So if you've never seen it, which you probably haven't, Conspiracy Theory is one of those really interesting films because Mel Gibson's in it, Julia Roberts is in it, Patrick Stewart is in it. They're the main stars. It was directed by Richard Donner. I do recommend that you take a look at it. I thought it was a really underrated film. I'm not saying it's like the greatest film ever made. I'm not putting the same pedestal as Superman or anything like that, or Goonies for that matter. But I really did enjoy it, and I thought it was a really interesting film. So I do recommend that one, and I think that's kind of like a hidden gem of Richard Donner. If any of you have some of those hidden gems besides the obvious ones like Superman, Goonies, or maybe even something from his television career that you're aware of, let me know. In fact, I guess it's really interesting also. He started out with Desi making commercials for Lucille Ball. I think that's really interesting too, as far as his directing went. Originally, he wanted to be an actor, which I didn't know that either. Originally, apparently, he wanted to be an actor, and a director took him aside and actually told him, "I don't think you're going to be a good actor because you don't take direction very well. But I'll tell you what, I'd love to make you my assistant." And supposedly that is how Richard Donner became a director, was he made that transformation from acting to directing because the director basically told him, "I don't think you're going to do well." So I think that's pretty interesting. Let's see. Donnie Pearson had a comment. He said, "If I remember correctly, I have first heard Gene Hackman's voice when he was seen on an old commercial for United Airlines." He says, I've never have I flown on that airliner though, but I have two United Boeing 787-10 models, both in United's current livery. Well, that's cool. So, Donnie, you're a model collector, I assume then. We haven't gotten into models a lot in Collector's Corner. It would be kind of fun to talk about some models, but that's really cool. So you have two United Boeing 787-10 models. That's very, very cool. That is something I think would be nice for us to talk a little bit more on Collector's Corner. I did actually have models as a kid, and I made a few models with my dad. But it's kind of funny because honestly, my dad was never very good at making models, neither was I. So we typically would get like the snap-on ones because we messed up the glue quite a bit when we tried to put models together, which is funny because my dad was an engineer. Oh, and Hollywood is in the house. I'm sorry, Hollywood. At first, I didn't see you there. So he gave a shout out. He said hi to Ms. Jane. Hi, James, and hi, Eric. Hail to you, Hollywood. Thank you for checking us out. I appreciate that, especially when I'm here flying solo and don't have my partner in crime here to help me out. So I appreciate you. Appreciate you being out here. And Johnny points out that Desi among the predecessors of CBS Studios. Yes, it's very interesting, the history of Desi and what has become of it. So infamously. I always honestly to this day, even though I've seen it, every day for how many years I've been watching the original series of Star Trek, it still trips me out that Lucille Ball essentially, was the owner of the studio that made, Star Trek. It still trips me out. So Desilu did a lot of great stuff. So, and they have a huge legacy. And apparently Richard Donner is part of that legacy. Again, as I understand it, Richard Donner actually started out, doing commercials for Desilu, which I think is really, really interesting. So he has that connection to Lucille Ball too. Lucille Ball, of course, obviously has a huge legacy, and in large parts because of Desilu. And of course, Desi Arnaz has a big legacy as a result of that. I mean, that's what the name is. It's Desi and Lou, right? It's Desi Arnaz and Lucy. So that they both loom large, I think, when it comes to the effect they've had. And the fact that, talking about Richard Donner, that Desilu has to be part of the conversation just kind of shows you the scope that they had. It's really, really interesting. Let's see. And then Donnie also goes on to say, speaking of Star Trek, there was a breaking news that Star Trek The Motion Picture, the Director's Edition, is getting a 4K upgrade. Donnie, I was not aware of that. That's really interesting. Gosh, I wish Dave was here because Dave would be all over that, I think. Dave is a huge, huge fan of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Huge, huge fan. And I think he actually does prefer the Director's Edition to the theatrical one. I know there's a lot of people that actually prefer the Director's Edition to the theatrical one. And Johnny, you may know better than me, but I think it's been kind of difficult to get your hands on the Director's Edition of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I think it was out of print for a while, and they were only releasing the theatrical version for quite some time. So maybe you can give me some information on that, Donnie, because what I ended up doing actually when we reviewed Star Trek The Motion Picture, which I believe was back in the podcast only days, back when Dave and I were only basically doing the podcast. We weren't doing anything live. We weren't doing any video. I think that's when we reviewed Star Trek The Motion Picture. And I didn't have a copy of it, but I was actually lucky enough to go to like a secondhand place. I think it was Half Price Books actually. And I found an old copy, and it was the director's edition of Star Trek The Motion Picture, the one that Dave himself had recommended to me. So that's interesting that there's a 4K version coming out. I would definitely be interested in checking that out. I don't have anything 4K right now. I have a 4K television. I recently, I don't know how recently it's been a couple months now, but I upgraded my television not too long ago, and I got a 4K. And the funny thing is, I don't have anything in 4K. So whatever 4K I've seen has only been streaming. And of course, streaming always has the problem that the stream is only going to be as good as your internet connection, right? You can have buffering problems. You can have all sorts of issues when it comes to streaming content. So I sometimes wonder about that, whether I'm getting the true 4K experience. But I don't think I have anything that plays 4K. That's another problem. Is I don't know if I don't think I have a 4K player now that I think about it. So that might be an issue as well. And he mentioned, Donnie goes on to mention, he says, thank you, Eric. It was reported by the Digital Bits last afternoon. So if anybody's interested in that story, apparently the Digital Bits has reported that Star Trek The Motion Picture, the Director's Edition, is going to get a 4K upgrade. I know there's a lot of Star Trek fans that would be interested in that. And again, I wish Dave was here because I know he would actually be really excited about that, because I know he loves that version of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I know it's one of his favorite Star Trek films, just bottom line, if not his favorite. He really likes that one. And let's see here. I think we're all caught up on the chats. So as far as the legacy of Richard Donner goes, I think it looms large. He obviously had a very long and I think really interesting career, right? Because he did have his ups and downs, right? He did have those moments. In fact, there's a story here where he talks about one of his first jobs that he was actually working on a television show called Wanted Dead or Alive. And basically that, the person that was on that show was Steve McQueen. And Steve McQueen apparently had an issue with him. And according to Richard Donner, in a 2000 interview, he says, I finally sat down with Steve and said, look, I'm going to quit because obviously you're not happy with me. He got very upset and said, nobody quits my show. So I said, well, Steve, You got to give me a hand. He turned around. He was tremendous, and we did the show. And I ended up doing 7 of them. That was my start. From there on in, it's been a whirlwind. So think about that. That's the way he started out, basically getting into a big argument with Steve McQueen. And Hollywood is notorious with these kind of stories, basically, where a star will get angry at a director, and that director never gets to work on that particular show ever again. Producers have gotten into that. There are stories of showrunners, show creators that got into arguments with an actor and basically never got to even come back on their own show again. So that's the way Hollywood is, right? But in this case, it looks like they worked it out and they ended up having a bigger respect for each other. But just imagine that's your first big gig, right? You've been doing commercials or whatever. You're kind of in a way a failed actor, and then you're doing this show, and that's your experience. The main star basically just biting your head off and treating you like garbage, right? So it happens to the best of them, right? It happens to the worst of them, and it happens to the best of them. That's Hollywood, right? So it is what it is. I don't really have anything else as far as pop culture news or anything like that. I like I said, I wanted to make sure that I did talk about Richard Donner. Again, if any of you have any input, anything you want to talk about with Richard Donner, or for that matter, anything in pop culture news, you're more than welcome to. As I mentioned, this is kind of more of a placeholder episode. It does help the algorithm that we make sure that we do have our broadcast regularly, that we're doing it at least twice a week. I think that I can just tell you from looking at the dashboard on YouTube, I know it has an effect. Even if the episode isn't that well received, even if the episode doesn't get that many views, it does help the fact that we make sure that we actually broadcast, consistently. That's really important, that we're out there every couple of days, that we don't go too long without a broadcast, without dropping a video, without something. So if anybody has any comments, again, this is sort of like a freewheeling discussion, not very set today. Again, normally this would be a Collector's Corner episode. We would be focusing on some trading cards, comic books, action figures, that kind of a thing. But unfortunately, Dave wasn't available today because he is working with his company, Kirby Tees. So I will give another shout out to his company that he's working so hard on right now. And please check it out, because he's doing some great work there, and he can always use that additional business, even though it can get, obviously, it can get too much. There can be too much of a good thing at times, right? But he definitely has been pushing that business a lot. And I, for one, am very proud of the fact that he's out there hustling and working right now and doing that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about that entrepreneurship. It's all about having your own business. Hey, that American dream, right? That kind of a thing. We just had 4th of July not too long ago, so it actually coincides a little bit. I do want to mention that typically on Sundays, we do our Rogues retrospective. And at this point, we do not know what we're going to be doing. So that's another thing I'll throw out there. If any of you have any suggestions about what you might want us to review on Sunday, our Sunday shows are typically at noon Pacific time, usually actually 12:05. I have to say 12:05 p.m. Pacific time, 3:05 p.m. Eastern time. And typically the idea there is that we review sort of something, in legacy type of content. We like to review things that are basically, older movies, television shows. And, when it comes to retro, that kind of is not necessarily a super well-defined thing, right? So sometimes we do get into things that are a little bit modern and might not be considered all that retro. But we're even willing to review new content if you guys ask for it. That's basically what the rule has become, because we've had a lot of mixed results when it comes to new content. Infamously, Picard was very difficult for Dave and I to review 10 episodes of that, and then also that was 10 episodes of our show. 10 weeks of our show where we did that. That was back when we only did one show a week. And so it was difficult. But if you want us to check out something new, I'm willing to check it out, as long as we both have access to it. That's really the key. It has to be something that we can both, readily access. I have Disney Plus, I have Hulu, and I have Netflix. and I believe Dave has all those things too. And then when it comes to legacy content, obviously we have access to all the free things like Tubi and Crackle and Pluto TV and that kind of stuff. So if there's something out there like that you're interested in us reviewing, please let us know. And Jane, unfortunately, you talk about the new movie, The Tomorrow War. Unfortunately, I don't have Amazon Prime. So if I do decide to review it, I will have to download it, and I prefer to avoid that. Now, if a lot of people start saying, we really want your take on The Tomorrow War, I will make that investment. I really will, okay? But the thing is, I try to avoid that because I already have these other streaming services, and I'll be honest with you, I barely use them. I'm barely on Hulu. I'm barely on Disney Plus. I'm almost never on ESPN Plus because I have the Disney bundle. I'm very rarely on Netflix these days. So The Tomorrow War is interesting also, by the way, because I know it has created some controversy that I don't even understand what it is. But I know it's there because I keep hearing the murmurings on Twitter where somehow this movie is controversial. And I think it comes down to people just hating Chris Pratt for whatever reason. Because I don't know, because he's regarded as too conservative or something like that. I can totally see that because that seems to be the way we're going. But if a lot of more people clamor for that, I will check it out. I do believe Dave has Amazon Prime. So one thing that I thought about doing also is, like, for instance, Dave recently watched a movie called The Paper Tigers. And we talked about it on the show. And he basically gave sort of like a non-spoiler review while, I was just asking questions about it because I haven't seen it. That's another film that is not really readily available through streaming. You have to download it. Like, I think he actually downloaded it from YouTube of all things, not pirated. He downloaded it. And so we might do something like that. Like, for instance, if Dave has seen The Tomorrow War, maybe we'll just like feature it in like a pop culture news segment or something like that, so we can at least talk about it. Because I do know that there's some controversy surrounding that, and I still don't quite understand it. Again, I feel like it's just because people don't like Chris Pratt. I don't know. You know what I mean? So I would be willing to delve into it a little bit more, but I don't have Amazon Prime, so that's the only caution for me. And of course, James says we just need more Picard, and I don't know, James. I probably can't really disagree with you on that. This show always needs more Picard, right? That's basically our logo. That's our slogan at this point. We always need some more Picard. Donnie mentions, I have those said streaming services as well, yet my Hulu account is disabled since that streaming service is no longer a free service. Interesting. Yeah, I have the bundle, Donnie. I did the Disney bundle where you did Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. And I've said it many times, by the way, ESPN Plus seems like one of the most worthless streaming services in the world, because the big thing with ESPN Plus is you can get the UFC fights, but they're the pay-per-view UFC fights. So on top of the subscription service you're already paying, you got to pay that pay-per-view nonsense. Now, they do have other stuff. Like, they do even have some UFC stuff on there that is, like ESPN Plus exclusive, right? And they, or something that they have on ESPN and they're showing ESPN Plus. They do that from time to time, but the big fights, it's pay-per-view. So ESPN Plus to me is a real ripoff. It really is. I wish they would do something better with that. I'm really hoping that, the thing that my biggest hope with that is college football. I'm really hoping that with college football, especially, as the new season starts this year, and we're getting past the epidemic a little bit, that they're going to have a lot of cool college football on there. Although who knows now, right? Because I don't know if people heard, but now I guess the Tokyo Olympics is not allowing in-person audiences at the Olympics. I thought that was crazy. That's some breaking news, not really related to pop culture as much, but it's crazy. It's crazy what's going on. It's like, I don't know. I don't know. And then James says Disney needs to remake all the villains' backstories with the new Cruella, Maleficent, etc. So you really feel they need to remake all the villains' backstories with the new Cruella, Maleficent, etc. That's interesting, James. I haven't seen Cruella. I have no intention of watching Cruella. I've made my position clear that I will not do that premium streaming on Disney Plus. It's the same argument with ESPN Plus, right? Different content, but it's the same deal. I hate the idea of paying for a streaming service and then having to pay a premium on top of that. I really hate that model. And Disney apparently is all over that model because that's ESPN Plus, and now Disney Plus is doing the same thing with their movies. I have seen the first of the Maleficent movies, and I was not happy, James. I was not happy at all. Maleficent, to me, was always supposed to be like the ultimate villain, certainly the ultimate Disney villain, right on par there with like Darth Vader, and she is a villain. She is a villain. And I don't quite understand this idea that what is the idea here? Is the idea that women can't be villains? Is that kind of the message that we're trying to put out there? In a lot of ways, that's what it feels like to me. Because it feels like that's what all these reimaginings are, is that like, oh, we have to take these female villains and we have to actually show that they were victims of misogyny or something like that. That's what I'm really feeling right now. And I don't enjoy it, James. I have to say I don't enjoy it. So I don't know if we have to remake all their backstories. I kind of like the original stuff. I like the legacy stuff. That's why I'm a retro rogue. You know what I mean? I like the old stuff. That's fine with me. I don't think I really need all these remakes and reboots and other marketing terms, Hey, sometimes a remake can work, and sometimes it can even be better than the original. And remakes are nothing new. I tried to point that out. Remakes are nothing new. You just take the different eras, right? You had the silent era, right? And they made a lot of movies. But once they had talkies, they remade a lot of those movies. And then once we had color, they remade a lot of those movies, right? Because they weren't in color, right? So that there is a progression, and a lot of it has to do with technology. And when it comes to science fiction, for instance, I can understand remaking a movie that maybe had very dated special effects or something like that. I can get that. I can get on board with that. But only as long as they keep what made that movie or that franchise good. And if they totally redo it and, seem to kind of forget why we were invested in that in the first place, why we liked it, that's when I have a problem with it. And getting back to the Tomorrow War, Jane was mentioning that she really enjoyed it. So Jane, I have heard different things about that film from a fan perspective. And certainly from a critical perspective. So I will tell you that the first time I watched the trailer, I wasn't sure if it would really be anything new to me. And you having seen it, the thing that came to my mind was the Battle of Los Angeles. That came to my mind almost right away. It was like, is it too much like that? Is it very derivative of that? Because I actually did enjoy that movie quite a bit. But I was kind of feeling like, is that basically what this is? And maybe it's not. Maybe it's something completely different. And maybe actually what I've heard some people say is that it's very much like a callback to the 80s. Like Tom from Midnight's Edge, when I was watching his show, he was talking about how he felt like Sylvester Stallone could have been the lead in that movie. Like it would have fit. It would have worked. And he felt like maybe some people don't like it because of that. Because it is like too much of like an old 80s film or something like that. But you got me curious. The more you talk about it, you got me curious. And I'm thinking, maybe I do have to check this out. Maybe I do have to ask Dave if he wants to review this. So, we'll see. And clarification from James, he's saying, not saying they need to regarding the Disney villains, the fact that they are. Yeah, that's true. They have reimagined these characters, if you will. They are not the same characters. They're not. I haven't seen Cruella, but I know enough about it to know this is not the same Cruella. It's just not. I've seen Maleficent. I can tell you that's not Maleficent. That's Angelina Jolie. You know what I mean? Doing her thing. And I don't mind when Angelina Jolie does her thing. I really don't. I'm an Angelina Jolie fan. But the thing is, I don't think it fits the character. And I think that these reimagining sometimes are really, really off. And again, they take away from what made the property cool to begin with. And it's like, you can make that story, like the story of Maleficent. You can do that story, right? Of the fairy queen or whatever that's betrayed and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that's a spoiler because that's just the setup of the story. You can do that story if you want. You can do that story. You can do that story of a woman scorned, because that's part of Maleficent too. You can do all that, but why do you have to take the established character and do that? That's my big question. That's my open-ended question to fans and to Hollywood and to everybody. It's like, why do you need to do that? Why can't you just create your own character that accomplishes the same thing? If that's what you want to do, right? If that's what you want to do, then you can certainly do it. But the fact that they have to use somebody else's legacy, like Walt Disney, have to use his legacy and tarnish his legacy to accomplish their goal, that I'm not on board with. I was just having a conversation on Twitter with someone about that, about the legacy of Walt Disney and how I feel in a lot of ways it's been so corrupted. I don't think Walt Disney would be that proud of Disney. I really don't. And then the other side of that is that really upsets me is there's plenty of executives at Disney right now that are fine with that. They're not only are they fine with that, that's like their goal. They want Walt Disney to be, rolling over in his grave right now. They want that. They're proud of that. That's really what kind of gets my goat, if you will. It kind of upsets me. So let's see. Well, it's funny, I said this is supposed to be a mini episode, and this is actually like a full-length episode. So that is quite amusing. I appreciate that. I appreciate some of you folks coming on here. Especially Jane. I really appreciate you showing that support with Dave not being here. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you folks giving me some company and putting some great comments out there. Donnie, thank you. You had some great comments as well from YouTube, and we don't generally get a lot of great comments from YouTube. Usually it's all Facebook users, so I appreciate that as well. If you're still out there, I appreciate you coming and checking out the show. So I will again mention Kirby Tees. That is Dave's company. That's what he's working on actually at this moment. That's why he's not on the show. Please check out Kirby Tees. That's actually the source of official Retro Rogues merchandise. So if in terms of our shirts and things like that, in fact, the base god, the character, the little avatar you see right now, we have shirts based on that. So check it out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. There's lots of other stuff on there, like the Skeletor. I like to push the Skeletor because I think it's such a fun character. And it's funny because a lot of stuff that Dave has on there isn't even stuff that he did himself. It's stuff that that are collaborations that he's done with other artists and other friends of his and things like that. So it really is more than just, your typical t-shirt company. And I do want to make sure that I'm promoting that as much as possible because Dave does good work, and this is independent. This isn't Teespring. This isn't, one of those things that'll burn you in 5 seconds because, this is a good guy who does good work and is independent. You're helping him, basically feed his family. You're helping him grow the show too. Yeah, that's another thing I'll point out because, the better Dave does with Kirby Tees, the more we can actually invest in the show and hopefully grow it. And please do, like, subscribe, let your friends know about it. I actually am very touched by the fact that anybody even showed up today with this being a very ad hoc episode. And I appreciate you folks listening to me drone on and on. Now, if you do want to learn more about me, I am most active on Twitter. That's at BaseGod14, at BASSGOD14. My DMs are open, so you can always send me a DM. Again, if you have those suggestions about things you'd like us to review, we do try to focus on more of that retro legacy type of content, but we are willing to look at something modern. And I will bring up the Tomorrow War with Dave and see if that's something that he's interested in doing. So please let us know if you have any suggestions. Now, BaseGod14 is also the official YouTube. That's also the official Twitch. So more likely than not, if you make a comment there, I'm going to be the one replying to you. Please, again, hit that like, hit that subscribe, let people know about the show. We want to expand it because we want more of this. We want more exactly of what's happening right now, is where we have people to bounce off of and talk to. And we really appreciate that. We appreciate our rogues gallery. We appreciate it when you are engaged and when you're making comments. And do have one last comment here from Jane. She says, Dave will customize a shirt too. Yes, it's very important to mention again with Kirby Tees that he does do customized shirts and things like that. So I will leave Jane with the last word, and I appreciate everybody checking out the Retro Rogues Live.